Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We are glad you're here for today's webinar, Thriving in Your 20s, Essential Healthy Habits for Young Adults. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Before we get to introducing today's guests, let's start off with a quick question. What motivates you most to build healthy habits in your 20s? Your options are long-term health and disease prevention, feeling better day to day, looking and feeling more confident, advice from family or mentors, or social media and wellness trends. Please select the best answer for you. We'll leave the poll up for a bit so you can make your selection. A disclaimer, as with any virtual event, occasional technical hiccups may occur. If you experience any video or audio issues, simply click reconnect or refresh your screen to return to the presentation quickly. A quick note for today's live attendees, this webinar is being recorded. Once the replay is available on our website, we'll send you an email with the link so you can watch it at any time. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Erin Snyder. Dr. Snyder is a professor of medicine and clinician-educator at UAB. Not only that, she's an alum, earning her MD from the Hearsing School of Medicine. Today, she's Chief Ambulatory Officer for UAB Medicine, Associate Program Director for Clinical Services for the Division of General Internal Medicine and Population Science. Well, before we continue, here are the results from that first poll. The question was, what motivates you most to build healthy habits in your 20s? Dr. Snyder, 42% of our audience says feeling better day to day. 28 say long-term health and disease prevention. So before we toss it over to Dr. Snyder, one last question, and we're going to go ahead and leave this one up for a little bit. Do you currently have a primary doctor you trust? 4 options. Yes, you're going regularly. Yes, but you rarely go. No, you're still looking. Or no, you just don't feel like you need one right now. I'm going to go ahead and keep those options up for a bit before dropping the results in the chat a little bit later. As for now, Dr. Snyder, the platform's yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg, so much for inviting me, and thanks to all of you for joining. Hopefully, I am going to touch on at least many of those things listed in the poll. So certainly feeling better day to day and feeling better in the long term and preventing disease in the future. That's really what I'm all about. So with that, I'll just sort of start with my inspiration for the talk, which is that I have a 12-year-old who is studying life science this year. And I guess maybe a month or so ago, we were studying for a test, and she had to memorize what are the things that if a living organism needs. And these are it: sunlight, water, air, temperature, and food. And I thought, I can frame a whole talk around that. And so really I will, just to try to touch on what are the healthy things that we need to be thinking about to meet your basic needs as a living organism in your 20s. So here's our roadmap for today, which is we'll talk a little bit about diet, substances, exercise, sleep, sunscreen, that's my temperature connection, sexual health, and primary care doctor. So what should you eat? So there are many, many diets out there, many, many options. And when I sit down and talk to patients about a healthy diet, I really try hard not to tell them one thing or another is better, because when this is studied, one diet does not sort of rise to the top as being the healthiest way to be. Eating real food, whole food that's not processed, the less processed or the less prepared for you, the better, the closer it looks like to the actual ingredient. And you need to be eating lots of fruits and vegetables. Look for lean protein, and people often have these ideas about specific foods that you should never ever eat. But I would say you can eat almost anything in moderation. If most of what you eat is very healthy, then you get to have some of the less healthy things from time to time. The problem comes when every day you're eating those less healthy things. So some good lean protein sources would be chicken. People often think that pork is bad and you shouldn't eat it. I think pork tenderloin and lean pork chops are actually really healthy and a great source of lean protein. Fish is an excellent source of protein. And then non-meat options which whether you're eating meat or not, adding in beans or tofu, which comes from soybeans, eggs, and low-fat dairy products are great other sources of lean protein to sort of make sure you're rounding out each meal. Generally, when you're thinking about grains or starches, brown is better than white. So brown rice, whole grain breads, darker colored grains like farro or quinoa are generally going to be healthier than lighter colored grains like white rice or pasta or white bread or white potatoes. All of those just get converted a lot more quickly by your body to sugar, whereas the more whole grains just take longer for you to process, and then it ends up you actually end up getting a lot more out of that and burning calories just by digesting them. And then I have drink water, because really drinking anything that has calories is not adding a lot to your day-to-day. So if you're we want to make sure you get your calories from food. If you're getting your calories from beverages, they're probably not filling you up. They're probably not making you feel like you ate anything, even though that Starbucks Frappuccino may have 500 calories in it. So drinking a lot of water, drinking no calorie sources for your liquids is a much better option. Okay, easy for me to say, but how do you actually, I take that back. I'm going to start by talking about macros, because the next question I get asked a lot is, well, how much protein should I be eating? There's a lot of debate about this, and I think you can take all of that debate with a grain of salt to just say that the truth is probably somewhere in all these numbers that get thrown around. But it seems that most experts agree on about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. One number that gets thrown around a lot is a gram per pound, which is really more like 2 grams per kilogram, and that may actually be too much. So even if you're trying to gain muscle actively, aiming for that 1 gram per pound could lead to, over the long run, could lead to things like increased risk of cancer, cardiovascular disease, especially if you're mainly getting that from animal protein. So maybe aim a little bit lower than that 1 gram per pound. And then what about fiber? So another new trend is fiber maxing. And I'm a huge proponent of fiber. We can be aiming for 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. This fills you up so you eat less, helps keep things moving through your GI tract, which is really great for gut health, can reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease, and actually reduce the risk of cancer, particularly GI cancers. So fiber is great, but I will say that if you jump in and start to eat that 25 to 30 grams a day all at once, you will feel terrible and think that I am a quack who doesn't know what I'm talking about. So I'm here to say, start really gradually, work your way up, and fiber needs water. So as you're adding fiber, make sure you're adding water as well. It really needs that to work. But getting fiber in is a great thing to do. Okay, so now how can I afford to do all that? All these healthy foods are expensive. How can I actually make this happen? And so this is where the healthy habit comes in. So in your 20s, while you're sort of setting off, starting to get your own place to live, your own kitchen, a little more control over what you eat, you can learn how to cook simple, healthy meals. Then you will have built a great foundation for you to take for the rest of your life. So start building those staple recipes, try things. If you love it, it becomes a regular. It becomes in the rotation, and you might make that again several times a month. And then you start to have this rotation of things that you eat all the time, and you can continually add in some new things. It helps you fill up your pantry. So you decide, well, I really hate quinoa. Well, that's fine. Don't buy quinoa, but then try another grain and find one that you do like that's healthy. You start to fill your pantry with those things, and then you start to go back and use them again the next time. And then you can add the tools, supply your kitchen as you need it, right? So really you need a skillet, you need a knife and a cutting board, and you need some serving utensils. And I think you can start there and make a lot of things and then add gradually over time. I have a picture here of this cookbook called Good and Cheap. So Leanne Brown actually started this as a part of her PhD. She wanted to see how could she make a cookbook or a list of meals and tips for people who are living on subsidized food like food stamps or SNAP benefits. And most of the time people get about $4 a day to live off of for their food. So she wrote a cookbook that really gives great advice, and then also some really specific recipes about how to do that. I think the other way to make this actually achievable is to plan. So sit down before you go to the store, think about what meals you're going to try to make yourself that week, and don't aim for 3 meals a day, 7 days a week to start with, but start where you are and gradually add on. If you meal plan, at least have a plan for the week. You'll have a list and you can stick to that list when you shop, which will save you money. Allows you to avoid going for takeout or quick meals because you know that tonight I'm having this, so I'm just going to go home and make this. And then if you plan it out, you can actually say, okay, well, I'm buying this can of coconut milk. I only need a little bit of it here. How can I use it up later in the week? Or knowing that I have it from last week, how can I use it this week? So meal planning is really key to help make cooking a little bit more reasonable and affordable. So when you do make it out to the store, I would say check the sales, look for what's happening in the store where you usually go, and build your meals around that. So, okay, chicken's on sale. What do I want to make with chicken this week? Know your seasons. So in the fall, as we're kind of headed into that, cabbage, dark leafy greens, string beans, or even shelled beans are now in season. Apples are starting to come in season. So think about incorporating those. And then, like I said, filling up the pantry. I think really good, affordable sources, things like dried or canned beans, frozen vegetables, and grains like rice, oatmeal, couscous. Those are all really great and affordable options to have on hand so that you can have some of those back pocket meals that you can make when you're exhausted, when you're home late and you're hungry. I get a lot of questions about supplements. So what vitamins should you be taking in your 20s? Probably you don't need any vitamins in your 20s. So probably if you're eating a pretty well-balanced diet, if you're eating, unless you have some really specific dietary restrictions, you're most likely getting what you need. When we study vitamins, we know that getting those vitamins from food sources are actually going to be much more effective, much more easily used by your body. So all those benefits of, say, vitamin C or vitamin B12, we know those because of people who got them from their diet. No vitamin supplementation over and above what's in the food has consistently been shown to reduce the risk of any chronic disease. So really my advice is don't spend a lot of money on supplements. Spend your money on that healthy food and learning how to cook it. Moving on to talk about substances. So the reality is that there are really no safe amounts of tobacco, alcohol, or marijuana. Some of these may be legal in various places. That doesn't mean that they're safe. So all of them have potential harms. You may have heard that, a glass of red wine every night is good for you, but actually some of the harms of alcohol probably outweigh any of those benefits. We know that even relatively low amounts of alcohol can contribute to an increased risk of cancer and cardiovascular disease. So I'm not here to say don't do any of these substances, but just know that there's really not a particularly healthy way to use any of these. What I will say, and the advice I do give, because we all live in the world where people do things, what I do say is if you're going to be using any of these, and particularly the mind-altering ones, marijuana, alcohol, be safe about it. So don't be alone. Make sure that you have people who are looking out for you, who have your back. Sometimes things get added to drinks or things get added to, cigarettes or vapes or edibles that you didn't realize were there, and you can become more incapacitated than you thought you would be. And so if you have someone there with you looking out for you who can make sure you safely get home, who can make sure you don't end up in a bad situation, I think that that's really key. So don't be alone, and think about how you're going to get home before you even start drinking or using, so that you can, again, get back to safety at the end of the night. moving on to talk about exercise. So the guidelines generally say that we want to exercise about 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. So what even is moderate intensity exercise? I like to think of it as if you were exercising with a friend, you could carry on a conversation, but you can't sing. You could talk, but you can't sing because you're working too hard. I also describe it as, well, you want to be out there breaking a sweat, feeling like your heart is pounding a little bit harder than if you were just casually strolling through the mall. So you want to be out there working a little bit for 150 minutes a week. Some people like to do that in 20 minutes a day, and that's wonderful. Other people would like to cluster that and do an hour and a half at a time, fewer days per week. That's also fine. It sort of all adds up to be beneficial and count for you. How do you start to build this as a habit in your 20s? Well, you got to try a lot of things. You're going to stick with what you enjoy doing. So keep trying until you find something that you really enjoy. You also have to fit it in your life. So think about, is it better for me to do this first thing in the morning before I go to work? Is it better for me to try to exercise on my lunch break? Or should I, and realistically, none of those things are going to happen. I'm going to run out of time. And so I need to do something after work. Should you be exercising at home? Should you go to the park? Do you have an outdoor place where you can get? Do I need to join a gym? A lot of people think the only way to exercise is in a gym or in some sort of organized class, and that's not really true. But for a lot of people, that makes it easier. You're a little bit more accountable. You always go to the same place. And so I think if that works for you, then wonderful. It really, really helps to have partners to exercise with you. So building a group of friends that you exercise with, going to a class. I will say paying a personal trainer is also a really good motivator to exercise, because that person's going to expect to get paid whether you show up or not. So you're much more likely to show up. Again, though, you can find any of these options that really fit in your budget and work for you. You just have to keep trying. And I guess the other thing I would say is when you do find some exercise that you like, really be mindful of, why do you like it? What are you getting out of it? What are the benefits? Most people will feel better, sleep better, have more energy, burn away stress. And most people can tell me, oh, I really do feel a lot better when I exercise, but it just falls off the list of things to do. If you can really be mindful of those benefits, you can pull yourself back in when life gets in the way, and invariably you slack off for a little bit. You can be like, oh, I am really tired. I bet it's because I'm not exercising. Let me put that back on the top of my list and find a way to make it happen. Okay, I told you I was going to get to sunscreen because we're going to talk about temperature as temperature regulation is a thing that all living things need. I learned from 12-year-old life science. But sunscreen, I think if there's one skincare product that you're going to use, it needs to be sunscreen. Really, we need to be putting sunscreen on all of our exposed skin every time we go outside and be really consistent about it. There are a couple of different options for sunscreen. So there are organic or chemical sunscreens. These are sort of absorbed into your skin. They absorb UV and convert it to just a small amount of heat, which is how they work. And then there's inorganic or mineral sunscreens. These stay sitting on top of your skin and just reflect the UV back off of you. There's a lot of debate about the safety of either of these, and there's pros and cons to either. We know that with organic sunscreens, you can measure blood levels of the chemicals that make those. So we do know that they are getting absorbed into your bloodstream. That bothers some people. We have, many years, 50 years of using a lot of these kinds of ingredients and haven't seen any harms from these ingredients. And so they are still felt to be safe. But if that bothers you or worries you, then you might want to choose a mineral sunscreen. Now, the mineral sunscreens often can have, because they're just sitting on your skin, they can often give you kind of a white or kind of a glow a little bit, kind of a cast to your skin. And so they've created, they're coming up with new ways to package these up into little nanoparticles. But the smaller those particles get, the more they are going to get absorbed in your skin a little bit. So it's really a trade-off. But at least I can say that for all the sunscreens that are on the market right now, experts tend to feel that they are all very safe for people and okay to continue to use. I mentioned putting it on exposed skin every time you go outside. So if you are going outside in a bathing suit with not a lot of clothing on, a lot of exposed skin, filling up a whole shot glass amount full of sunscreen and then putting that on your body is about how much sunscreen you need to use. Another way to think about this is called the teaspoon rule, which is basically a teaspoon for every limb. So a teaspoon for your arm, a teaspoon for your other arm, a teaspoon for your face, a teaspoon for your trunk, a teaspoon for each leg. And that helps you if you're not exposing everything, but just going out with more regular clothes on. Of course, if you buy UV protective clothing like shirts with long sleeves or hats, then that can limit how much sunscreen you may need to put on, because that skin is then protected by the UV or the SPF clothing. Either one of these sunscreens, you need to wait about 20 minutes for them to be most effective before you go outside. And then you need to reapply about every 2 hours or after you get wet from swimming or from sweating a lot. And sunscreen should be at least 30 SPF, which is mostly what we find out there. But the higher SPF, the slightly longer you can wear it without having to reapply. But in reality, that 2 hour rule is a good one to kind of keep in your brain. Okay, well, what about sleep? So the sun has gone down and you're going back inside and back to sleep. Most adults need between 6 and 9 hours of sleep per night, but only about 2/3 of us actually get that much. So most people say that they're getting less than 7 hours of sleep per night. And if you've had a late night, you really understand what that means. If you don't get enough sleep, you're much more prone to have accidents or errors. You're less productive at work. But there's also real health consequences to poor sleep. So increased risk of depression or anxiety, other mood disorders, increased risk of inflammation, which can lead to diabetes and heart disease, actually increased risk of obesity from not enough sleep. I will say that patients who don't get enough sleep or people who have sleep disorders like sleep apnea generally have a very hard time losing weight until we can fix that underlying problem. And this is just because that lack of sleep triggers a lot of inflammation in your body, which triggers hormones which keep you awake and keep you hanging on to every calorie, because your body interprets that stress as something terrible is going to happen and I better store and plan for the future. So if you are one of those 1/3 of adults who are not getting enough sleep, how can you do better? How can you get healthier sleep? So really starting to build the habit of having a regular bedtime routine is key. Trying to go to bed at the same time every night, get up about the same time every morning, whether you're working or not the next day, is really, really helpful. Your brain becomes tuned to that cycle, and that helps you sleep more soundly when you are trying to sleep. And then having rituals around bedtime are key. Again, you're kind of prepping your brain, getting your brain used to, okay, it's time to go to sleep. I have learned recently that actually warming up your core body temperature can be really effective at helping you fall asleep faster. Something as simple as putting on a pair of socks before you get in bed can help people fall asleep up to like 10 minutes faster than if they didn't do that. And a lot of the sleep aids that I can write prescriptions for can get people to fall asleep about 10 minutes faster. It's really sort of on the same order as a lot of the sleep medicines. So warming yourself up either with a bath or tea, putting on warm clothes or socks, read something in a book with a lamp behind you as opposed to having a screen shining a light at you. Anything that is shining that bright light at you, whether that's a television or a phone, tells your brain it's time to wake up. And well, you want to do the opposite of that. You want to be careful with food, alcohol, and exercise really close to bedtime, within about an hour of bedtime, because all of those can impact your ability to sleep. I think of your bedroom as for sleeping and for sex, and that is it. So again, getting the screens out of there, not having a TV or a radio in there. Studies have also shown that even with our phones off, on silent, turned upside down, put away from us, our brains, our subconscious is still sort of halfway attuned to that. We're expecting that phone to go off. And so actually getting the phone out of the bedroom helps people sleep. So this is a plug for you to get an old school alarm clock and leave your phone in another room. Your bedroom should be really dark. Have light blocking blinds if you can. Have it be cool and quiet. And while I say I don't want a lot of screens or outside noises in your bedroom, sometimes a fan or a white noise machine that can drown out some of the noise from outside is really helpful. And then you're trying to sleep, you've done all the right things, but you can't fall asleep because your brain is spinning and working on your problems for the next day. The stress over not sleeping leads to more not sleeping, and that can actually kind of spiral for you. So if you really decide, okay, it's not happening, I'm just not tired, get up and do something quiet. Some people recommend actually writing down those worries or writing down that thing that your brain was working on and just try to get it, okay, I won't forget about this. I'm going to write it on this piece of paper. I'll look at it in the morning. Give yourself a little time, do something quiet and relaxing, and then try again when you get tired again. And then if you have a really bad night of sleep, try hard not to nap the next day. This is the same advice we give when people fly overseas and they have jet lag. You get there in the morning, try to stay awake because otherwise your schedule is going to be off. This is true at home too. So if you have a bad night of sleep, you take a nap the next day, well, the next night you're not going to be able to sleep and you'll be in this same cycle. So try really hard not to take particularly a long multiple hour nap in the daytime because it's really going to impact your ability to sleep that next night. Well, while we're in the bedroom, I wanted to talk a little bit about sexual health because the relationships are a key part of what makes us human. Really, my advice that I give to patients about sexual health is just to be safe. These are really intimate, vulnerable relationships, and you want to make sure you're physically and emotionally safe as you're entering into them. Condoms are the best method we have to prevent infection from sexually transmitted infections. So you need to be wearing condoms, and you need to be getting STI testing if you're in sexual relationships. So recommended now is STI testing annually for chlamydia, gonorrhea, HIV, and syphilis for a lot of people in their 20s. These can be urine tests and blood tests, usually a mixture of both things that you can get at your primary care office. If you are having high-risk sexual activities, then you are potentially eligible for something called pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, which is a daily preventative medicine specifically designed to prevent HIV. The guidelines right now say anyone who's interested in PrEP is eligible for PrEP. So if you go into a physician's office and they prescribe it, and you say, I'm interested in PrEP, then you're eligible. There are specific guidelines about kind of particular patient behaviors, and your doctor may ask you about these, but really if you want it, you should have it. Being on PrEP, though, does mean getting regular lab testing and regular doctor visits, so you do need to have sort of a usual source of care in order to get PrEP. There's also something called PEP, or post-exposure prophylaxis, which is doxycycline, a good old-fashioned antibiotic that can be taken after high-risk sexual exposures to prevent STIs. This is usually recommended for transgender women and for men who have sex with men primarily, but another sort of option to talk to your doctor about for preventing infections. And then family planning, pregnancy planning. So in 2025, we have a whole lot of ways that you can be in charge of when you get pregnant, when you want to start a family. I would say pregnancy is in your control. If you're a person who can get pregnant, you should have a plan about whether or not you want to do that, and if you don't, what you're going to do to prevent that. But I also say that one person in that relationship should not be the only one in charge of pregnancy. So even if you are a person who cannot get pregnant, if you're in a relationship with someone who can, then you need to be thinking about this. There are a whole lot of options, too many to talk about in this talk, but my favorite online resource is a website called bedsider.org, and they list all of the options, everything from the pull-out method to condoms to IUDs, and you can actually sort those from short-term, long-term, efficacy, whether it's reversible, whether it's hormonal or not, whether it's something you have to do every single day or something you can do once and forget about for a long time. So I really love this website, really easy to understand information about kind of all your contraceptive options so that when you go to your healthcare provider, you kind of know what you're asking for. So I think self-care is another thing that people talk about a lot or ask me about a lot. All of the things I've just been talking about, diet, exercise, sleep, those are all really part of self-care. But I think the other part of self-care that I just want to remind people of is, what are the things that make you happy? What brings you joy, and how do you make time for that? Whether that's, being a part of a relationship, and doing things together or doing things just for yourself. You really need to start to understand what makes you happy, what makes you laugh, what brings a smile to your face, and how do you find more of that in your life? These are, again, kind of things to think about, things that help really get you through the tough times. And really in your 20s, you need to start to understand that you are in charge of that. You're in charge of finding those things that make you happy. But if you don't even know what they are, how can you possibly get there? This can be, big things like saving for a vacation, planning a vacation once you get back from another vacation, or saving for big purchases. But it can also be little things like not working on the weekend if that's important to you, and making sure that you have time to rest or recharge, making sure you have time to be with your friends, as often as you feel like you need to. I think setting those boundaries because you know that this is important for your happiness is going to help make you, a better friend, a better partner, a better child of your parents, whatever that is, that's important to you will help. If you can set those boundaries and make time for that, I think you will be better at that and help you weather some of those really tough times. And then I wanted to talk about social media. So that was a question in Greg's poll, which I was really glad to see, because I don't get asked necessarily about specific, social media posts. But when something starts to pick up on the algorithm, I definitely hear about it. And so I just want to say, be smart with influencers, be smart with social media. If something sounds too good to be true, you should question it. If someone is coming on saying this one thing is going to solve all your problems, give you energy, give you a better sex life, make you rich all at once, is probably not true. So if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But at least you should be skeptical and you should try to get more information about that thing. I always say triangulate. So don't believe the first source that you see. Start to look around, ask others, look for other sources. If someone's putting up a article, a scientific paper that they say, backs up their supplement or whatever it is that they're encouraging you to do, go to that original source and look at it and see, does it make sense? See if there's somebody else who's read that paper and got a different answer. So I would say don't get everything from one person, but look for multiple sources before you start to do it, before you start to really buy into something. And then remember, are they selling something? And I will say most everyone on social media is selling something, and it might just be engagement. It might be your likes. It might be your time on their platform so that they can then sell advertising around that. And that's fine. All of us are selling something or trying to make a living. But again, if they're, telling you this story that their one product or their one supplement is going to solve everything, I think be cautious of that. And if they're the only place you can get it, I think be extra cautious of it. Most things, if we're going to say, oh, we just had this study that said vitamin D can do X, Y, Z. Well, you should be able to get that vitamin D from wherever you want. If the only way to, possibly get it is this proprietary blend of vitamins and herbs that you can only get from me, then I think be skeptical of the kind of veracity of that claim. And then have a trusted source that you can use to triangulate or go back and ask, I saw this, does this make sense to you? And of course, I am selling something as well, because I would like all of us to have a primary care doctor. And so I'll come right out and say that. I think having a primary care doctor that you trust can be really helpful to go back and ask these questions of and say, I saw this. What is this? What do you think about it? Should we be doing this? Should I try this supplement? How much protein should I be getting? All of those answers can be very specific to you if you have a relationship with somebody who knows you well. So why have a primary care doctor? Well, one is to keep up with preventative care, which I really didn't talk about today, but happy to answer questions if you have them. But in your 20s, people with a cervix need cervical cancer screening. So this is a pap smear. You can have some chronic disease screening, like checking your high blood pressure, looking for diabetes. There are several vaccines that you're eligible for in your 20s. Primarily, it's a flu shot every year, a tetanus booster every 10 years. And if you never had them in childhood, an HPV vaccine series, you're also eligible for those in your 20s. They can answer these specific questions about some of the things I talked about today and other things that you may have questions about just for your day-to-day routine life, how to feel better and live longer and have less chronic disease in the future. It's really, really helpful to have a primary care doctor who knows you when you're well. And you can talk about all of these things. You can do the preventative care. But then when you get sick, you already have that relationship. And so you can call that person and you can get seen while you're still sick. And man, when I know someone when they're well and they come in sick, I can immediately, and upon walking in the room, tell the difference, really understand how those new symptoms are impacting them and have that frame of reference so that I can try to get you back to how you were when you were well. I get a question a lot about, do I need an OB/GYN? And I think the answer to this is not always. So a lot of general internists and family practice docs can do that routine cancer screening, discuss menstrual issues, prescribe contraception, do all of those things that a OB/GYN can do. I have a focus in women's health. I see a whole lot of women and try to do a lot of this for my patients, but even sort of those people who are not particularly excited about women's health can do all of these things, and I think of it as part of their routine practice to do them. So you don't always need an OB/GYN. Although I'm always happy to refer out if I start to get into tougher issues that I can't get better. And so with that, I will just share a couple of resources. So that Good and Cheap cookbook that I mentioned at the beginning is a free online PDF. If you Google Good and Cheap cookbook, you'll see it. You can download it for free, or it is available in a hard copy, real life book. If you'd rather have it that way. There's a couple of other cookbooks here. I mentioned bedsider.org. And then I also just wanted to mention helpguide.org, which has a variety of articles put out by Harvard Health on a lot of the topics I mentioned today, plus a lot more. I use these a lot for patient education. Most of them are things you can do yourself without needing a prescription or without needing a specific other resource to help you, just reading about them and trying to understand how to maybe change some of your behaviors. So a plug for that. And with that, I will stop and would love to hear any questions that you have.
Yes, and if anybody does have any questions, go ahead, drop it in the chat. We will get to those. I also dropped in the chat some deeper dives on some of the topics that Dr. Snyder talked about, including eating well on a budget, the science of sleep, A to Z. Yes, there's 5 Z's in that title, and the science of social media. So we've hit deep dives on a lot of these different topics. So it's great to see them on here as well. Did you say wear socks in bed?
Wear socks, yes.
Man,
yes.
Nobody likes doing that.
Oh, I do. But no, I just learned this. But yeah, if putting on socks can help you fall asleep up to like 9 minutes faster, and melatonin is about 9 minutes faster, if at all. So it's just as good as that.
And I need blankets. My wife, she loves being cold. I love being warm. And we may have to get one of those dual temperature beds down the road, but we'll see. And I do want to mention some of the best sleep I've ever had was last year. Went out of the country and we were jet lagged, but we stayed up and man, we slept hard that first night we were there. So I can attest to that. Questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat if you have any. So I'm going to start with, what habit mentioned today do you think is the hardest for a 20-something-year-old to adopt?
I think I'm going to split my answer. So I think learning how to cook, if you've never learned before you got, into your 20s, before you sort of got to where you are, learning how to cook is hard, but man, there's such a huge payoff. And then I think exercise is the hardest for everybody that I talk to, including myself. I'll raise my own hand there. It's hard to find time to fit it in your life. It's hard to make it work. But again, building that habit now, when I am talking to patients in their 70s and 80s, they say, man, all that walking that I did has age-proofed me so that I'm still mobile now. And so you're paying it forward for the rest of your life if you can start to build that habit.
So can technology, I know we touched on kind of the social aspect of things and technological. How can technology help with apps, different websites, reinforce some of these healthy habits?
Yeah, I think you have to know what motivates you. The step counters and the closing your rings, man, that is a huge motivator for a lot of people. If you are one of those people that wants to win that game, if you have a goal that's a step count, or if you have your rings and you want to close them every single day, that can be really motivating. And I'll find people, like we're at a sporting event. Oh, I got to go get my steps in. I'm going to miss the next quarter because I'm walking around the arena, because they're going to make it happen. So that's incredibly motivating. For calorie tracking, if you're trying to lose weight, there's a couple of apps called, one's called MyFitnessPal and one is called Lose It. Both of those are free and essentially are calorie counting apps, but they also have exercise built into them. So you can see really easily, like, man, I did that aerobics class and now I can eat this many more calories today. So that's kind of motivating too.
When it comes to social circles, peer influence, stuff like that, what roles do they play in all of this?
Oh, huge. I mean, I mentioned that in the sort of self-care side, that's relationship care. And I think we are social animals. We need to be in relationships with people. And that can be friends, that can be romantic relationships, that can be our family, people that we work with, really everything. So figuring out who are those people that help you to be happy, that do things that you enjoy doing, and then making sure you build those groups and kind of maintain those relationships so you have those people to do that with. So whether that's exercise, whether that's, cook, have a book club, travel, any of those things, what brings you joy, often it is associated with other people.
Which habit do you think has the biggest long-term impact on mental health?
All of them. No, it's those healthy relationships. It's knowing what you need out of a relationship and making sure that you're getting that from your relationships and trying to distance yourself from those relationships that are taking and not giving back to you.
Now, I know we want to follow all of these to create healthier routines, but what is one small change, micro change out of this that can kind of lead to that domino effect that we want as we approach the 30s and 40s?
Yeah, I think you can pick any one of these and work your way there a little bit at a time. So of course I'm going to give a vague answer like that. But, for example, if you're buying your lunch every single day and you could pick, 2 days out of the week that you're going to make something and bring it in. Well, all of a sudden now you've gotten yourself healthier food, that's more whole food, and you've saved money, most likely. And you've started to learn a recipe that you can cook. So, I'm a big fan of make a salad once a week. And this is my salad usually is not a lettuce salad, but a bean salad or a pasta salad or something like that once a week that sits in my refrigerator, and then I can take it to lunch every day. And so that has a really easy payoff. And now I've learned a recipe. And so then the next time you can learn another recipe and start to apply it in another place. But I think you could do that same kind of thing with exercise, with sleep, really with anything.
Last question, unless something gets dropped in the chat. We have an audience of students and young adults that are professionals. How do healthy habits differ between somebody that's a junior, senior in college as opposed to somebody who just started working full time in the workforce?
Yeah, well, your time is less your own. I'm sure our juniors and seniors in college feel really busy. I know that they're all balancing a lot of things, and I don't want to minimize that. But man, when you have to clock into that 9 to 5, that is a big chunk of your time. That is a lot less flexible than I have to go to these classes, and then I have the rest of this time I have to write papers and study and et cetera. But you can at least flex it and do that when you want. But when you have to be at a place every day for a set amount of time, it becomes a lot harder. So figuring out how to fit in some of those other things outside of that is key.
Dr. Snyder, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great information, and hopefully the audience has several things they can take away from today's presentation.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed putting it together and talking to y'all today.
You're so welcome. And a quick note for today's audience, this webinar was recorded. Once it's uploaded onto our website, we'll get an email with the link so you can revisit the session or share it with others. In the meantime, we'd love for you to join us for these upcoming webinars. On October 7th, learn how to stand out in a virtual job market with expert advice on networking, interviewing, and more during remote control, navigating your career from anywhere. Why do nightmares happen and how can we manage them? Join Dr. Christina Perpoli-Parker on October 30th for a spooky deep dive during The Science of Nightmares, the dark side of dreams. Confused about carbs? On November 19th, Tara Kelly breaks down the science behind this misunderstood nutrient and clears up common myths during The Science of Carbs, Unraveling the Spaghetti. And finally, end our 2025 series on December 11th with New Year, Better You, Reset the Right Way. Dr. Joseph Capiano will share practical strategies for building sustainable health habits in 2026. You can register for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. As we wrap up, we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us improve and shape future webinar topics. Just scan the QR code on your screen to access a brief survey and share your thoughts. Once again, thanks so much for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.